A writer down on his luck hears 5 stories of doomed inhabitants of a haunted tower block. Will he become the 6th?
Ghost Mansion is a 2020 Korean horror film which interlinks 5 separate stories. Today we'll recap and review the events of this movie, so let's check it out.
Chapter 1 of this story is titled The Author. A student, Jung Ji-woo, arrives at Gwangli. Gwangli is more of a tower block than a mansion. In any case, it's falling apart and full of grime. Jung Ji-woo meets a worker at the building for an interview. He clicks his recorder and begins the interview. The man is the caretaker at the building, though he doesn't reveal his name. He asks Ji-woo why he's come, and he says that this building has a lot of mystery surrounding it with stories of hauntings. Ji-woo is a cartoonist, but he's come here to learn more about the place and find inspiration for his next work. The caretaker talked about a massive fire in the building when it was an orphanage. The adults all ran from the building, leaving the children to burn. He mentions an author who lived in room 504 and experienced hauntings there. The film cuts to this man being shown around the home. The realtor talks about how sought after the building is, while the author, Lee Boyoung-hoon, sits with his ear to the floor and can hear distant children's screams. He takes the flat and is writing by night, but he's struggling to create work he's happy with, so he pours a slug of whiskey before hearing strange thumping from beneath the floorboards. His phone vibrates. His wife is furious with him for moving out and leaving her and their infant son, though he says it's necessary for his book. His wife's voice distorts and sounds sinister before the call disconnects. The next day, Byung-hoon is at the pharmacist getting painkillers for a headache. Returning to his apartment, he hears a child's laughter as the door opens, revealing an ashy school shoe with the name Jeong Woong Ram written on it. Suddenly, a small contorted figure on all 4s crawls past the door. He chases out of his flat after it, but finds nothing.
Watching the CCTV back with the caretaker, though, there's no evidence of the child. He is absolutely convinced that the kids are taunting him. The caretaker isn't buying it, though. So, a frustrated Byung-hoon goes to room 404 to inspect.
There's no answer at 404, and looking through a window, he spots a row of children's shoes similar to the one from his flat. He opens a cupboard outside and finds another series of shoes, one with the same name as the one he saw in his flat earlier. He collects all the shoes in a bin bag and takes them to the trash. Later that night, he's shocked awake by the sound of keys unlocking his door. Jumping out of bed, he goes to his door to find the blue bin bag full of shoes waiting for him, accompanied by running footsteps and banging in the corridor. Looking out the peephole, he sees the image of 3 children standing in the corridor. He stumbles backwards and falls, finding the white shoes scattered all over his living room. He looks up to see a group of children with burnt faces looking at him as his story crashes to black. Chapter 2 begins, titled The Pharmacist. Ji-woo remembers that Byung-hoon used to live in Gwangli and vanished 2 years ago. The caretaker starts telling the story of a young and stylish woman who used to live on the 9th floor who wound up in Gwangli after dating the wrong guy. In apartment 904, a young woman, Sung-hwa, washes his hair as a series of horrible murder stories are being told on the news. Then she gets a call from her mom, who's convinced she's dating an untrustworthy man. She insists she's not dating anyone new and hangs up the phone. Suddenly, her radio changes from its current station and plays a strange old song before repeating the story of a man murdering his family. At her pharmacy, we see Byung-hoon arrive to pick up his medication. She asks her colleague, who surprises her with her appearance, how it feels to be married, and we find out from her that not only is Sung-hwa dating someone, but they are also married. Her phone rings, and it's her new man, Ho-jun. After she hangs up, her colleague rushes in on the phone, even though she's already been talking to her. That night, Ho-jun arrives looking stressed and tired. He reveals his wife has found out about them. Sun-hwa thinks this is great. They can finally make their relationship official, though Ho-jun is not enthusiastic. He says he'll need to stay there for a while, but she'll need to keep it a secret.
The sound of running water wakes Sun-hwa that night. She tries to wake Ho-jun, but he doesn't stir. The door to the bedroom opens and we hear the same old-fashioned song on the radio. Da-hai walks to the bathroom to investigate and is startled by the silhouette of a man behind it. Of course, when she opens the door, there's no one there.
The next day, Sunhwa arrives at the pharmacy to find two policemen waiting for her, Dong Sung and Dong Pao.
Remember the news story about the man who killed his wife and child on the radio? Well, that was him. The rule in movies is that if something horrible happens, let's say on the news or TV or radio, then you better believe that our protagonist is going to be wrapped up in it.
She remembers him saying how he wanted to stay there and how she couldn't tell anyone, and it all makes sense. Arriving home, she finds him in the shower. She says she knows what happened, but she's staying loyal. They have to run away together. She starts packing everything up while she shouts to him in the shower. Outside, she hears sirens and calls for him to hurry, but he keeps repeating the same sentence about keeping his shower a secret over and over. Then we hear a song on the radio again. Sunhwa sees him dancing through the glass, and a shiver runs down her spine. Suddenly, there's a knock at the door, and she looks through the peephole to see it's Ho Jun. She lets him in and points to whoever the man is in the shower. Ho Jun takes a hammer from Sunhwa and goes to investigate. He walks slowly to the door, but before he reaches it, he stops and tells her he said not to tell anyone she was there. Suddenly, the walls are covered in blood. Looking back to Ho Jun, his face is blood-splattered, and he wears a sinister smile holding the hair of his dead wife's body. The chapter ends with a crash, and we begin our next. The salesman. Byung-hoon arrives in a dark apartment. It's a mess, and the windows are papered up. He finds a man hidden there, someone he's been looking for who used to live in 708 in Gwangli. Years earlier, the man is in the office. It's the agent who was showing Byung-hoon around in the first chapter. Later that day, he's at a viewing, Byung-hoon's viewing, in fact.
The way that the film ties these stories all together is a simple but rewarding trick, and it's satisfying every time.
That night, he's having dinner at his apartment and talking to his wife, but she's silent. As the camera flits to her, we understand why. His wife is a life-size doll.
She has a strange, empty expression. And in a film like this, we know that sooner or later, she's going to be used to scary effect.
He awakes that night to bubbling water in his kitchen sink, which somehow gets blocked. Attempting to unplug it, he pulls out a handbag strap that he remembers from somewhere. A plumber comes by to fix the blockage the next day and finds a clump of female hair to be the source of the problem, which of course makes no sense to the estate agent with his doll wife. The next day, his colleague adds to his stress, talking about how Gwangli used to be home to a cult that ended in a suicide pact. His dinner with his wife is ruined once again when he's distracted by a bubbling sink. Turning back to his wife to see her head has somehow moved, facing into a dark patch of the room. He gets up to inspect, and his doll appears from the darkness, wrapped in her plastic curtain, moving like a puppet. He hides in a cupboard lit only by the flame of his lighter, and as he breathes deeply, the image of his doll rises behind him in the dark. Now chapter 4 begins. The student, Ji Woo, is being interviewed by a publisher about a book he's written who wants him to make it longer. So he decides he has to go back to Gwangli for more stories. Leaving his apartment that day, his girlfriend, Da-hai, tries to make him stop going back to Gwangli. She says he's been working too much and reminds him that it's his birthday and they can have cake, but he refuses and carries on. Back at Gwangli, he offers to pay the caretaker for another story about Gwangli. He tells him the story of a young man named Tae-hoon who lives on the 6th floor. He'd failed college and didn't know what else to do, so he moved into 604 with a childhood friend, Jae Seok. They're both happy to catch up again, and Tae-hoon has been studying abroad, though he notices Jae Seok has a strange rash of white spots on his face. He says he'll only stay for 2 weeks, but Jae Seok is happy for him to stay longer.
As they sit to eat dinner, Tae-hoon suddenly realizes that all of the food in front of them has spoiled and gone moldy. In bed that night, he suggests that he will clean up the flat to get rid of all the mold that he's seen. He turns around to find Jae-seok staring at him silently.
Tae-hoon tries to make a cereal that day, but the milk is moldy and very off. In fact, all of the food in the cupboards seems to be off. The mildew on the walls is also driving him crazy, so he goes to get cleaning products, and we see a sped-up version of him tidying the whole flat and putting it back in order. Behind a locked door, he finds the mildew on the walls worse and covers a family portrait. When Jae-seok comes home to find the mildew gone from the portrait, he is furious at what he's done and runs from the apartment. The mood soured and Tae-hoon looked for another friend to crash with, but as he was leaving, he found the mold in the room with the portrait back worse than ever. Jae-seok also returns and he apologizes for shouting earlier but seems to be acting strange. Finally, he turns around and we see his face covered in slime, mold, and spots. He looks terrifying. As he backs away, black hands appear from the portrait and drag him into it as Jae-seok closes the door. In the present day, the caretaker tells Ji-woo to stay in Gwangli to get a feel for the place himself. Byung-hoon is intimidated by a strange man in a baseball cap in the elevator. Of course, it stops working and he frantically tries to get out. The door opens and he finds himself in the corridor, though the baseball cap man is back. He sprints after him as Byung-hoon attempts to escape and hides from the man in a locker. In his apartment, he finds a tape recorder from the caretaker. The next story is his. He's in the car with his brother. He's the baseball cap man from the elevator. They're planning to rob Gwangli. They enter the same apartment he'd led Ji-woo to. They're looking for a safe and find evidence of a cult who worked in Gwangli, strange scripture hanging from the wall, and an old man's body wrapped in bandages behind a locked door. Opening another door, the caretaker finds the money they came looking for. They're rich! Though his brother is distracted, he senses the bad energy pouring out of his flat. The caretaker goes quiet and his brother looks around the dark apartment for him, but there's no sign. He hurriedly stuffs the money into the bag but is distracted by a strange, hunched figure in the corner of the flat. It's the embalmed corpse. He flees the flat and runs outside into the snow, realizing his brother still has the car keys. The caretaker catches up to him, but he's subdued and strange. He keeps saying he saw something in the closet. Suddenly, it's not his brother. It's the embalmed body. We see the car shake from the outside as this story ends. Ji-woo goes to the closet and opens it, sensing a dark evil coming from within. The corpse appears behind him and he hides inside, finding it locked. The caretaker comes into the room. He's different now, sinister. He tells Ji-woo that he will leave him locked in the cupboard, so he does as Ji-woo wails for help. Later, his girlfriend arrives looking for him. Ji-woo comes out to meet her. He gives a strange smile, and the film cuts to black.
A portmanteau film, if you will, is one made up of many interconnected stories by events or themes, and this works very well for horror. It's a really great opportunity to throw together a bunch of different spooky ideas for a well-rounded horror experience. It's basically the film version of reading a book full of horror short stories, and it gives the viewers lots of room to find their favorite. Ghost Mansion did a fantastic job of making Gwangli seem like a truly frightening place to live. In fact, it's a wonder that anyone lives there. The eerie corridors, green light, and varied ways in which people have lost their lives in its long, dark corridors make for a fun, entertaining horror film with plenty of variety. Please subscribe to our channel to be notified when we upload, and don't forget to suggest movies that you want us to recap in the comments down below.